Today on the Pitch Book Podcast, Zach is pitching Poor Charlie's Almanac by Charles T. Munger. And I am pitching How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton M. Christensen. Batter up! Zach, you have some really interesting information for all of our listeners. You have found what so many have been seeking. It is basically the perfect combination, perfect blend for a t-shirt. Tell us.
All right. Before I dive in, I want the listener to think, what is the most comfortable shirt I've ever worn? Just think about that for a second.
Okay.
And then think, what is that shirt made out of? I asked myself that question a couple years ago. I got this shirt. I went to a company event. It's not my company, just another company. And they gave me a shirt. I'm like, oh, this is cool. It was like a workout. Now it was like Under Armour was the make, the brand. The company had a badge on the shoulder. I didn't really care for that. I like shirts to not usually have things on them.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this shirt is so comfortable. So I'd wear it all the time. And now it's like a rag. I've worn it so many times. But the badge on the shoulder, it was knitted, like sewn in, but it's really hard and crusty. It's been through
Yeah.
my washer so many times. But the material is so comfortable. So have been, and when I got the shirt, I made the mistake. I cut out the tag. I'm like my 14-year-old. She doesn't like any tags scratching her, touching her.
Mhm.
Maybe I just have sensitive skin, but I like a shirt to feel really good. So the other day, I'm on Amazon. I'm doing every once in a while, I'll like jump on and I'll order a random shirt combo with different blends. I've tried like cotton poly, cotton polyester, 85, 15. Are you ready?
I'm
Let
ready.
me ask you, what would be because I
Well,
haven't.
you already spoiled it, I think, on Twitter, so I saw it.
Oh, okay. I blew it.
Yes.
All
So
right. So
is it 95 cotton, 5 spandex?
that's it.
Okay. I'm
If you
really
order a shirt, and I don't think it matters. Now they might instead of spandex, it might be called elastane, which is spandex.
okay.
For some reason, those shirts just feel
How did you find
it's
it
it's
on that
noticeably
shirt?
different.
Sorry, I missed that part.
How did I find it?
Did you Google this? Did you like how did you actually figure out did you take it to like a
Trial and error.
forensics?
No,
Okay.
no. Just trial and error. Now, I went back to Under Armour. I actually did research because they had a brand called Heat. I think it was called Heat Guard
hmm
because it says that on the inside of the shirt in print. But when I went and ordered that from Under Armour, it came and it was a polyester
Mm.
junky shirt. It's like kind of stretchy and I don't like polyester. It's kind of
Yeah.
scratchy and not
Yeah, it's a
comfortable.
little too 70s for me.
Yeah.
The polyester look.
I mean, it wicks away moisture, but it's not super comfortable to wear. It feels kind of tight.
I'm not a superhero, so I don't really wear too much spandex. So,
That's
all
it.
right.
So
Well,
95.5 cotton spandex mix, change your life. I will
speaking
only accept shirts now in that mix.
speaking of the perfect mix, we
Yeah.
have a brand new sponsor that is really exciting. Zach, why don't you take it away? And we're gonna, for those on YouTube, you can actually see this. It's probably really helpful to see it. So if you're listening right now, go to check out our YouTube page. And we have a really cool new sponsor, some amazing artwork from Blackbird Watercolor.
Yes.
And go ahead, take it away.
Okay. So cool story about this sponsor. This is actually a listener of the podcast, and we just had a conversation with her name's Debbie Seibert. She's actually the artist for Blackbird Watercolor. If you are getting into the fall, you want to hang something up that's kind of fallsy. I don't know in your house, Matt, when Christmas comes or Halloween comes, you out with all the old decorations, in with the new. These
Sort
are
of,
awesome.
yes.
Yeah, so these watercolors, they're all original art, and so you can go there. It's etsy.com/shop/blackbird watercolor. We'll put this in the show notes, but you can go look up different artwork that she's done: watercolor florals, greeting cards, watercolor botanicals. She's got a page with just autumn. So we're in the fall now. The temperature has dropped, the leaves are falling. We're kind of in the fall, getting ready for Thanksgiving. And then she also has these watercolor landscapes, just really beautiful artwork. So if you want to just make your house nice and not pay a ton of money, or if you're decorating your office, these are really great pieces of artwork to hang up really anywhere.
She's
So
extremely talented, extremely. So definitely, even if you're not necessarily in the market for something, go check it out. Just see how with the amazing stuff that she does. So
yeah,
very
great way
cool.
to
So again,
support
it's
small businesses. So we're
yeah,
excited to have Blackbird Watercolor as a sponsor of the podcast.
yeah, and again, it's etsy.com/shop/blackbird watercolor. All right. So, Zach, I now that we have figured out what the perfect shirt is, I'm excited to learn about poor Charlie's Almanac. Um, Charles T. Munger, people might know, right, is a very famous investor, right? Friend of Warren
Yep.
Buffett.
Yep.
Um, Tell us how you found the book, and tell us a little about kind of the story of how you got involved with this book.
Okay. Well, in finance, these are I love to read finance. This is one of the categories that I really enjoy. This has been a book that's been on my list for a very long time, and I finally just said, okay, it's time. Charlie passed away this year,
Mhm.
so I think he was 90. I want to say 98 or 99. Real, just really old. He made a comment in one of their annual Investor Berkshire meetings. He said, "Tell me where I'm going to die, so I will never go there."
Yep.
And I guess he never found out where he was going to die. But just an incredible book. So, as you mentioned, Charlie Munger was Berkshire or Warren Buffett's business partner. The book, multi-billionaire, very successful investor, very capable, and I would say very different than Warren Buffett. When you listen to Warren Buffett talk, he has kind of a folksy, um, old-timey type of persona. He's really funny, has some really funny quips, and Charlie was really funny too. But Charlie, I would say, was uh, a little bit more expressive in some of his comments in their annual shareholders meeting. But this book really, what he did over the last several decades, he's given different speeches at universities or in front of different investing groups. And the book synthesizes those speeches, and he gives an evaluation of his own speeches that he gave. So it starts out with his life story growing up. He worked for, ironically, I think Warren Buffett's uncle, if I remember right. So when they were young, they worked very hard. He ended up going to law school, uh, graduated, was doing law for a while, and eventually recrossed paths with Warren Buffett. And he said when they got together for dinner, they just sat there. It was like for 7 hours, and they had both been investing, and they were really aligned on their processes for investing. So the book goes through, and I've just to keep this fairly straightforward. He gives a lot of great examples throughout the book, but I've just pulled it into six concepts that I found really helpful. So number one, in the book, he talks about building a lattice work of mental models. So from multiple disciplines to approach problem solving problems effectively, having a broad toolkit from psychology, economics, history, and biographies. He was a big fan of Benjamin Franklin. He'd read all of Benjamin Franklin's history. And he talks about how, as you're going through life, when you have a specific type of a problem, you need a mental model in place for all of these various problems that can come up in life. And so, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create lots of different mental models for solving problems. The second thing is he talks about inverting your problems. So if you're starting a business, you often think, well, if we make this product, this will be our market and we can easily sell this product. It's really interesting and there will probably be a lot of people that buy it. That's not a great way to be successful in building a business. So he said, what you want to do is invert the problem and say, what could go wrong with this business? What things could break down? What are the obstacles? What are the things that we should clear up? And by working through those problems, you really figure out how to effectively build the business by missing those hurdles and obstacles. The third thing in the book, he talks about avoiding psychological biases. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. So, a psychological bias would be like confirmation bias. If you have a pre existing belief, let's say it's going to be election season. Matt, just for the listeners, he didn't want to talk about politics today. So, we're going to dispense with that. The election is tomorrow. Um, Probably smart that we stay
By
away
the
from.
by the time you hear this, you'll know everything. So
Yeah.
good
So
luck.
how many people, or just, think to yourself, if I have a political view and I really believe in that view, I'm going to search out things that support my view, that confirm what I already believe. I'm not likely going to go research somebody else's opinions or somebody else's belief that conflict with mine. So, which can be problematic because you end up just siloing yourself away from other
So,
ideas.
and I'll just take that a step further because I've noticed this as well in my own life. It doesn't even have to be political, but like sometimes you'll look at the opposite point of view and then you'll do the opposite of confirmation bias. You'll be like, oh, that isn't true because of this. Like you'll does that make sense? Like instead of
Hmm.
like, oh, I want to be confirmed that I'm correct, like, no, I'm gonna look at the alternate theory and then in my mind explain why they're incorrect or whatever. Does that make sense? So you even if you do listen to the other side, if you're not even remotely open to it, it's like confirmation, it's like unconfirmation bias. I don't know. It's like you fighting against yourself to prove them wrong. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And right now, and everyone can relate with this. We're deep into the political season. The election's tomorrow, and I would say I've heard from both sides. If you vote for the other candidate, it is going to be the end of the United States.
Right. Yes.
50% of the 50% of the country believes that if you vote for the other person, it's the end of the country. And the other half of the country says if you vote for that person, it's going to be the end of the country. So 100% of the country has this belief that if you, well, maybe not 100%, but at least in the extreme. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of step back and think, at least for me, to try and step back and think, why does the other half of the country disagree with me on this issue? Like, what is their perspective? What's their framing? What's their point of view? Not just in politics, but in business. What are the other outside views that I'm not considering, that I'm kind of being blinded to?
Well, I'm just hoping that this podcast gets out and it's not the end of America, because we got this podcast to get out and that's coming out next week. So hopefully,
That's true.
hopefully neither 50% is correct. Anyway, no, I get what you're saying about confirmation bias. So
So yeah, avoiding psychological biases, and there's a lot of great books. He talks about influence. I pitched that book, I think a few episodes ago. That's a great book by Robert Cialdini, where he talks about how people are easily influenced. When
mhm.
Charles read that book, it turned a light bulb on his head. He's like, oh, you mean there's more than just running a good business? You actually have to have sales, and this is how you influence people
Mhm.
through social proof. When people see their peers doing something
Mhm.
like buying 95% cotton, 5% spandex shirts, you're more likely now, right, Matt? When you buy a shirt,
I'm gonna investigate it
it's
for
gonna
sure.
it's gonna cross your mind. You're gonna think,
Mhm.
you know what, cotton's okay, but a little bit of spandex in there, it makes it
You
stretchable,
know what?
comfortable.
As soon as this is over, I'm gonna find out what this shirt is made out of. Like it's
Cotton, it's 100% cotton. I'll tell you that
okay.
right
Okay.
now. I can just tell. So
If you want to come on the podcast and pitch a book, we will be able to tell you what your shirt is made out of.
We
within a 99.9% accuracy rate. So just be aware of that.
we need to get some merch with
We do it. This is
95
95.5.
5.
95.5.
95.5.
Okay.
You heard it here. All right. So the psychological biases, there are dozens and dozens of them. Be aware of them. There's another book I pitched earlier this year or last year. I think it was called Thinking Clearly, where it walks through
Yep.
all of these biases. So he rehashes that. He talks about the fourth principle here is the circle of competence. Knowing, just staying within the realm of the things that you know. What's really fascinating about Buffett and Munger is they have amassed this massive fortune. I mean, this company, Berkshire Hathaway, is now in the top 15 of the largest companies in the world, maybe the top 10. It's up
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And they did it largely in the beginning without tech. Now, they did buy Apple, which was a very good trade. Even when they thought Apple was maybe overvalued, they felt like there was still a lot of runway, and it turns out they were right. And
Yep.
Apple ended up becoming 40% of their total portfolio.
Yeah.
But they really try to stay within the realm of what they know. They know insurance very well. They know energy very well. There's some industries where they're kind of lumped in where they feel like they
Mhm.
have that circle of competence.
Yeah.
So he just talks about stay within what you know really well and try
Mhm.
to avoid going into these fields where you could just get totally massacred and like, I don't know anything about this. And people do that in
Mhm.
investing all the time. They hear from a friend, oh, this stock has really gone up or this cryptocurrency does this. And they
Yeah.
end up just getting totally wiped out. Fifth principle is the importance of patience and long term thinking. One of the quotes that he talks, this is a Charlie Munger quote, but he says basically, once you've made the investment and you feel very confident, then your next job after you've purchased it is to sit on your backside. He doesn't say backside, by the way,
Got
you know,
it. Yeah.
and just be patient and
Mhm.
know that there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. But if you
Mhm.
are right on the company, on the purchase, really all you have to do is just sit back and just wait.
Mhm.
And
Love
that's
it.
the hardest part because people get pretty emotional.
Yeah, and they'll make poor decisions as they watch their stocks go up and down.
Yeah, as you
Okay.
get the fluctuation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And then the last one is, and this was probably my favorite. He said to go to bed every night a little wiser than you were when you got up. If you'll set that as your goal to be constantly curious and continuously learning. He laid out a mental model that I hadn't really thought of, but Warren has mentioned this about Charlie, that he reads from a lot of different disciplines. They're both very avid readers, but Charlie would have a broader range of topics that he would read about. So he would study psychology, finance, biographies. He was really multidisciplinary in that respect. And I thought that for most people would be a very good framework if your mind was kind of being expanded. And I think that's one of the purposes of this podcast is to help people kind of think more broadly
Hmm.
outside of maybe just a narrow
So
set of
say it
books.
again. Say it again. Go to bed a little wiser. What was it? What was the quote
He
again?
said, go to bed every night a little wiser than you were when you got up.
So basically, it sounds like he's basically pitching the podcast and said, like, if you just listen to the podcast every night, you're going to be
Yeah,
wiser because you
for
listen to
sure.
Matt and Zach.
Yeah,
95.5. I mean, you can't go wrong. So
just a little
awesome.
bit. It's like that
Just a
idea
little bit
of
wiser.
yeah, how much does 1% compound on a daily
Hmm.
basis? If you're improving by 1%, you gave
Hmm.
me a book the other day that which I appreciate, and I started reading it. I'm 40 pages in, and you kind of you gave it to me, and you were like, "Ah, it's okay. I've read it. It's not great, but it's all right." And I read the first 40 pages, and I thought this first 40 pages, something clicked in my head for work
Oh yeah.
that just really
That's
turned on an idea.
That's why I said that, and we will talk about this book as in a double, maybe triple header. But I really, really enjoyed the first part, and then at towards the end is where I kind of dropped off a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit. But
So I'm
that's
in the
why
good
that's
part.
why That's why I said that, is I didn't want to get your expectations up too high, but I completely agree that the first, in fact, I think what happened is I listened to the first bit and I thought, oh, Zach and Nate need to have this book, so I
Yeah.
bought it. And then I listened to the rest. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give him a little caveat at the end, but not that it's bad. It's just it
Yeah.
wasn't quite as good as the first part. I agree with you. Okay, we'll get to that. That's a little teaser.
But that's
Or
30 pages, which was maybe 20 minutes of my time
yeah,
that I invest. I try to invest 30 pages a day. I try. I'm not perfect, but I try. And I try to be consistent in getting my 30 pages in. And that 30 pages, when I finished, I think it was chapter 5, there was like half a page. And last night I was just trying to I had some ideas flowing. I started writing them down, organizing my thoughts around my practice, and it was good. It
yeah,
just, from that 30 pages, it was a slam dunk. It's probably
yeah,
like how Charlie felt reading Influence, like some
yeah.
lights turn on, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, I'm excited it's a little teaser to be even wiser when you listen to that podcast, guys. Can't wait for that. All right, what do you are you any more principles? Are you ready to rate it? What do you think?
Those are
How
really the
long is this book? Is this a pretty I get the sense that this is a big long book. Am I wrong?
it's pretty, it's fairly long. I listened to it. I didn't
Okay.
read it. I will
Uh-huh.
order it and I will have it on my in my library because I'll probably read it again. Um, yeah, I don't know how many pages it is.
That's
That's
okay.
a question. I could ask. I could Google that and look it up.
It
It's
doesn't
just
matter.
fairly long. I'd say
Okay.
it's probably like 400 pages
Okay.
if I had to guess. Um,
What do you
yeah,
give it?
I would rate it as a home run. I think when you find people like that in the world that are willing to share their ideas, not everybody is to that level. I mean, Charlie and Warren have been very open. They have their annual shareholders meeting. They take questions. They've given speeches. I think they've been very open about their process,
Hmm.
which if you had some kind of trade secret, you knew how to make more money, you're incentivized to not tell anybody.
Right.
And there are companies that do that. Like there's a company, I won't say the name of the company, but they've had compounded returns of 40% per year. I mean, it's just like a phenomenal, consistent return that they have achieved, but it's in a black box. Nobody will tell you how they do it or what they're doing.
Mhm.
It's
Is
been
it
verifiable.
Enron by chance or no? Okay, good.
No, it's like a legitimate trading
Just
investment
I'm
company,
just joking.
and it's hard to get access to invest. Anyways, Charlie and Warren have been the opposite. They have talked to people about value investing, about buying great companies, quality companies, and when you find people like that that are open, you'll see them. I think Elon Musk is another example of somebody that's out there, does a lot of interviews, is in front of people, talks about how he thinks about things. Um, when you find those people, I'm just curious, like how their brains work and how they think about things. So I would give this book a home run. I think he does a really good job of trying to synthesize his lifetime work in one book.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah, it's that's I think that's on my to-do list. I think there's actually a book that I think I bought it and it's in this vein. I think it's actually like a it's I want to say it's like a investor's uh like summary of notes from all of their meetings for like years and years. Anyway, I can't remember the name of it. I'll get to it and pitch it at some point. Anyway, all right. So my book, I'm gonna put you a little on spot on this, and this is not a bad thing, but it just I was pretty surprised when I I got this book from the library on Libby, and I it wasn't what I thought it was. So that's why I'm putting you on the spot, just because just based on what I'm gonna tell you about the the title of the book. Like you can't judge a book by its cover. I'm just really curious. So the book that I read is How Will You Measure Your Life? So and it's Clayton M. Christensen. I don't know if you know him at all.
I've read this book.
Oh, you have?
I have.
Oh, surprise.
But it's been a while,
Okay.
and um
So I thought this was gonna be like I don't know what I thought it would be like a how do you decide like that you're gonna look forward here?
go ahead, keep
Oh,
talking.
you found it?
I'm listening.
It's I thought it was just more like I don't know. I don't want to say self-improvement book, but like how how do you reflect on your life and make sure you've made the right decisions? And it's a lot more of a so I thought it was more like a personal type of book, if that makes sense. It's actually a kind of a business approach, a business approach to your life, if that makes any sense.
Uh-huh.
So that's what surprised me about it. So unfortunately, I can't put you on the spot as much if you don't remember or if
No,
you've
go.
read this.
Well,
But
it's been over a decade since I
oh,
read this
really?
book.
Oh, okay, okay,
So
cool.
when you said it tonight, I'm like, ooh, I should probably go back and read this book because he does share some really funny stories in the book, if I remember right.
Yeah. So just a little background. I don't think I knew this. I'd heard of his name. He is a Harvard like business school professor. He did spend some time in the business field, but he basically studied and kind of helped companies figure out why they were successful or weren't successful. And his what he does is he comes up with business theories. He's most famous for like a disruptive innovation theory.
Hmm.
I think it's the inventor's dilemma or innovator's dilemma, something like that. I haven't read that one yet, but he obviously I've read another one of his books and he has a lot of the same stories. So that is kind of interesting. Like he kind of regurgitates some of the same stories, which is fine because obviously not everyone's read all of this stuff. But he basically uses business theory and tries to apply it to your life. So it was a very different take on what I thought it was going to be. And essentially what he says is you don't like just say, oh, who's been successful and why were they successful? It's who's been successful and what's consistent amongst those that we could develop a theory that if people follow or like a pattern or model that if they follow this, they can be successful as well. So he
Yeah.
has these business theories that you're supposed to apply to your life to figure out how you're going to measure it or get the most out of your life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the first thing he talks about, he basically just compares your life to a company's successful business company's theory. So the first thing he talks about is resource allocation. Um, Talks about basically since, if you're a company, you have to figure out what am I spending on marketing, what's important, with this particular resource, their time, their energy, who's talented, what job do we put them in? Um, and basically, how does that apply to your career? Do you invest in schooling early and then later, try to switch careers? Is that worth your time? But also, how do you invest your in your relationships at home along with your career? How do you balance all of those things? And basically saying like you're again, it sounds weird, but you're like a company. How do you decide what your resources are going to be and the timing of those resources? So in other words, if I want to spend time with my kids and watch, Disney Channel with them when they're little kids, I can't really do that when they're out of the house. I've lost that chance to have that resource allocation.
Yep.
Um, so that was kind of the first point. He talks about disruptive innovations and kind of how you sustain those. This is more career focused. So like maybe you you make basically people focus on like short term incremental improvements in their careers, but maybe neglect something that might be a really big disruptive innovation. Like, do I change my career path? And do I take advantage of this potential opportunity? And just give you an example, my dad decided when he was 45 that he wanted to quit what he was doing and go to law school. So he completely changed what he was. He
What was he doing before?
so sorry, he essentially stayed in the same industry.
Okay.
He was an insurance adjuster, and he would work against the insurance companies for the policyholders, like in home losses, et cetera. And an insurance company ended up suing him and saying that he was practicing law without a license, because he would often these things would often go to mediation rather than into the court of law. And so he said, "All right, well, I'll just go to law school." So he went to law school, but he did the exact same thing as far as that. So he would still he would still be basically arguing with insurance companies saying, no, you're taking advantage of the client and that's not what the policy says. But if it went to the legal realm, he could take it there. So again, he changed his career trajectory just so he could go further into the depth to, help
But
these
that is a
people.
huge, like going to law school mid-career is a huge
Yeah.
disruption.
I mean,
Your family,
we moved
it's a
our entire
full-time.
family
Yeah.
to Oregon from Utah. So anyway, that's just an example that off the top of my head. What I've noticed about myself when I read that, I had been without getting too much into detail, way too loyal to some of the companies I've worked for
Mm.
and not really taken potential opportunities, but yet been forced to take opportunities later in life that have ended up being really good. So it was just kind of a, I don't know. I basically, it was an interesting chapter for me. I'm going to skip this one because I think it's my favorite one to talk about. He talks about processes, basically cultivating habits and skills that align with your long-term values. And companies do that over time, but it relates it to like your personal growth. So what's important to you and how do you, align that value and that with that goal? So in other words, if you set a goal that doesn't align with your values, it's probably not a very smart goal and you're probably not going to be very motivated to do it. The other thing he talks about is marginal thinking. So sometimes people will, and he brings in like real world examples. I think this is the one where he talks about Blockbuster and Netflix.
Hmm.
And for those that don't know, obviously, if you don't know what a Blockbuster is, that you're pretty young. But basically, Blockbuster would have the physical rentals of movies on DVD, and Netflix said, "Hey, let's just do this in the mail." And one of the things, the way that Blockbuster made money was by late fees, and Netflix basically took what they were making money on and said that's going to be our competitive advantage is by shipping these things out and not having any late fees, we have less turnaround time in the mail. Anyway, he just basically talks about how some companies get so big that they could make a really minor investment and blow out this innovative competition that's on their tail. But because they're already making so much money in certain ways, they don't really their thinking is too small. Like we can't think out of the box because we're already making so much money here. Why should we bother with this? And then obviously, you know the story. Netflix ended up just completely destroying and putting all blockbusters out of business. So
Totally.
he talks about that more from a ethical standpoint in your personal life. So he talks about he has kind of a cool quote that I'm going to paraphrase. He said it's easier to maintain your values 100% of the time than it is to do it 99% of the time. Basically arguing that if you compromise your values just this once, it can lead to a slippery slope of unethical behavior.
Yep.
Um, and he gives some personal examples. It was pretty interesting. Uh, then he talks about strategies, business strategies, and adapting, be flexible, like go for your goals, but be flexible and adaptable, which kind of relates to the marginal thinking. Okay, with all that said, the one thing I want to get to, which I thought was really interesting, but almost
There's one
go
more
ahead.
story
Yeah, go
when
ahead.
you're done that I want to share from the book.
Okay, well, let me share this part, and
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah.
this is the story. He gives a really cool example that's been kind of stirring in my mind because it's very, I want to say almost like a clinical way to think about things in a relationship. So he talks about what he calls the job to be done. Is this the story you're going to talk about or no?
No, no.
Okay. So he talks about in business what he calls the job to be done and how we don't just buy things, we hire a product to do a certain thing. Okay. So his example that he gives is a fast food company he doesn't name, but he says they wanted to see how they could sell more milkshakes. And so the theory that they came up with is why would someone hire a milkshake? Um, so they do a bunch of research and they found out that like a lot of their customers would actually buy milkshakes in the morning. Um, and they
Okay.
thought they knew why, but they really couldn't figure it out why because a lot of people bought milkshakes in the afternoon. So they're like, okay, well, it's not just so they just basically dove more into depth. Like, and so why is someone hiring a milkshake? And basically the job can differ. So what he says was they went in more depth. They ended up figuring out when they came in, did they stay and eat the milk, drink the milkshake? Did they get it to go? Anyway, they went way more in depth and started interviewing people, and they basically started asking, "Why did you hire this milkshake?" And of course, they don't know what that verbiage means, so they have to kind of explain it, like, "Why did you buy this, and why are you leaving now?" And they found out that in the morning, these all these people were hiring the milkshake because it was something to keep them entertained on their commute to work.
Oh, okay.
And he says, and then he talks about how some people think they're competing against other milkshake companies, but when they found this out, they said the other things they could hire would be a bagel, a banana, they could hire, a sandwich to whatever. But what they found with the interviewing is that the reason they liked these milkshakes is because they were really thick and they took a long time to drink. And so people would say, well, I could do a banana, it would be like over too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I might get hungry later in the day. Anyway, so they thought, okay, this is really cool. Now we know why they hire this milkshake in the morning. And then in the afternoon, they thought, okay, cool, let's make everything super thick, take forever. And then they said, well, and then they found out when people were in the afternoon, like, why do people hire a milkshake in the afternoon? And what they found out is a lot of times it's the one thing that they can like maybe tell their kids it's okay. Like they've been telling their kid no for, all week. No, you can't have extra candy. No, you can't go to your friend's house. You can't play this video game, whatever. But like they're at this restaurant, they're ordering a burger or whatever. Oh, Dad, can I have a milkshake? Yeah, sure. They get the milkshake, and if the milkshake's too thick, it takes the kid forever to drink, and the dad gets frustrated. So
Yeah.
they basically the advice they gave these people was in the morning make the milkshakes really thick, in the afternoon make them super thin and easy or smaller, so that when kids are buying these, it's not frustrating and people feel like it's a waste. So
Yeah.
he not only talks about that the competition isn't always a direct competitor, but it's also not necessarily the same throughout the day. Does that make sense?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So it was really interesting way to think about it. And then he applies that to your life. So then he says, what is the job to be done as a husband? What does your wife hire you as a husband for? Which that's why I said it's super clinical way to think about
It's
it,
the good
right?
looks.
Yeah,
It's
well,
it's the arm
clearly.
candy, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, exactly. And he talks about how in relationships, the lack of communication or understanding of I'm not sure why my wife hired me to be her husband. I think I'm providing what she wants, right? I thought she hired me to provide money and a house
Mm.
and blah, blah, blah. But what she really hired me was to spend more time with her, make her feel, loved, etc. So me thinking, me being frustrated that I'm at work all the time, that's not the case, but, me being at work all the time and not spending time with her, she's frustrated at me, even though I think I'm doing the best job in the world because, like I'm the perfect provider or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a really weird way to think about it, but it's been kind of pouring over my mind. Like, what does a kid hire his dad for? Why would you? What's the job to be done as the dad? What's the job to be done as a husband? What's the job to be done as an employee? And it was just a really interesting way to think about like what what the job to be done is for various roles in your life. So I thought it was
Well,
really that was probably the most interesting thing to me.
that's a really unique business insight. You assume that you're solving this kind of a problem for a client,
Hmm.
but maybe they bought you for a different reason.
Yeah,
And
and
knowing
they
those reasons is a good lever to have.
Oh, for sure. And that's I've been thinking about it at work. Like, what's the job to be done for what I do, and for you, right? So for you, it might be, it's the level of comfort, right, of security that they're seeking or whatever, right? Whereas you think it's this or that. It's
Hmm.
just really interesting. He talks
Yeah.
about I can't remember who he quotes, but he says we're not selling quarter-inch drills. We're selling quarter-inch holes. Like that's not what they want to buy. They don't want to buy a drill. They want to buy a
Yeah.
quarter-inch hole. They
Yeah.
don't they don't care what the tool is. They don't care how fast and how awesome it is. They just want to have the job done. And
Yes.
it's just a different way to think about how you're selling that product or why they hire you. So
Hmm.
anyway, I thought that was probably the most interesting concept. Um, and again, kind of a weird clinical way to think about relationships, but probably pretty insightful if you think about it. And again, you have to just kind of stretch your brain a little bit because it's not, like, hey, honey, why did you hire me as your husband? That's not going to
Yeah.
work. But
I'm gonna ask that tonight, laying in
good
bed.
luck. Good luck.
Why did you hire me?
Why did you hire me?
One
Anyway,
one one story that he shared that I've
yeah,
never forgotten, and as you've been talking, it's been jogging my memory about this
yeah,
story from this book.
yeah,
And I'll have to ask you how you think it applies, but
sure.
he shares this story of his daughter playing, I think it was on an intramural or high school basketball team,
Uh-huh.
and the coach that was brought on to coach them, it was one of the girls' dads, and he knew nothing about basketball.
Uh-huh.
Like at the beginning of the season, they were not very good. And he came up with this strategy to have his team do a full court press all the time,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
entire game. Do you remember this story?
I don't remember it being in this
Oh,
book, but I know this story. Maybe, but he does use a lot of stories of the same. Maybe I missed it, but I have heard the story, and it's basically the parents were super mad, right? Because these
yes,
girls, yeah, yeah, they didn't. Anyway, yeah, they did. They were like, "Well, this you can't do this. It's not fair." And he's like, "Well, this seems like the most effective way to win,
exactly.
right?"
Yeah, he's like, if we just do full court press and we just out condition you, then you won't have time to rest.
Right.
Because most teams will like take their time getting
Yeah, getting up the
from one
court.
side of the court to the other, but they
Hmm.
would just run all their girls down and they'd like immediately get the ball down there. And this is,
Yeah,
brief.
it's like an innovation that people that know the sport would never think of, right?
Right.
That's kind of that's the moral,
Like
right? Is it
not
like
everyone, not everyone plays that way, but if you play that way, you're
well,
gonna
and
wear
he
them
made
out.
that strategy out of ignorance, right? Like he didn't
Right.
like
Yeah.
um
Wasn't intentional. He's just like, why aren't we running all the
yeah,
time?
let's
Why
just
don't,
do this all the
like
time.
let's just hustle all the
Yeah.
time. And they ended up I can't remember if they won a
I
championship,
think
but
they did. I think they
they might
win.
have ended up
Yeah.
winning because they just did
But
this
I
full
think I
court
remember the
press.
parents being very upset because it was not yeah. Anyway.
But
So,
it's like thinking outside the box. You know,
yeah,
for
for
somebody
sure.
who enters your game has never played it, they're gonna
Hmm.
start to see the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was great. I would probably give it a I'd probably give it a home run. I think, but if nothing else, just think about that in your life. Like, what's the job to be done
Hmm.
in or what are you hired for in various situations, or the product that you're selling? What's the actual job it's done that's done, and think that the competitors aren't always necessarily the direct competitors. So for me, the what I thought was one of my competitors might not be an actual competitor, it might be complacency within the organization. Um, right? Like that's a competitor,
Yeah.
and I
Your
need to be aware of
apathy.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
apathy, things like that. So anyway, I just if nothing else, I'd take away at least that and think about that in your situation. So,
that's awesome. One of Clayton's, I don't know if I'd call her a disciple, but one of his proteges is
hmm
Whitney Johnson.
hmm
So if you haven't read her book, when I pulled both of these off the shelf, it's really interesting how both of these books, so I've got his book here,
hmm
her book, they're the exact same size. She
Oh,
literally
disrupt yourself. Yeah,
disrupt yourself. Have I
yeah. I
pitched this
remember.
book
I
before?
think you have.
I
It
may
sounds really
have.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, she's excellent, but Clayton was her mentor.
Okay.
So
And
she'd go to him and she's
I
built
should
this incredible business.
yeah, I should say Clayton Christensen as well as James Allworth and Karen Dillon are the authors on this because he had some help with
Okay,
some of the
pulling
other
those
yeah.
together.
hmm
Yeah.
So I should give credit to all of the three of the authors, but obviously Clayton's the main one. So
Yeah. Awesome.
interesting books this week. Uh, what else we got to say? Just go out and find go just investigate your shirts, see what's your most comfortable, and then
I
get back to us. This is really critical information. We want to know what you guys think. If you're a more 97.3, you let us know. Okay?
Exactly. And I would just say again, go check out Blackbird Watercolor on Etsy. Get some greeting cards.
Absolutely.
Be ready for Christmas. Be ready for the holidays.
Yeah, especially like if you're a guy that's listens to this and you want to impress your wife, like go get they're seriously amazing. It's amazing stuff. And could you imagine like, hey, here's this beautiful fall card that's hand painted print. Guarantee your wife is going to be happy and excited. So
Yep. Yep.
go check it out. Hey, thanks everyone for listening to the podcast. If you want to be a guest, let us know. We'll happily have you come on and pitch. And thanks everyone for listening. Like, subscribe, share, tell all your friends. Get wiser every day by listening to the Pitchbook podcast. Thanks to Deja Vega for providing the music. We appreciate all of you listening to the Pitchbook podcast. Have a great day.